Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is installing and using some scripts in Maya. Scripts are useful because they're going to give us the ability to automate certain operations that we otherwise would have to repeat. Or if you're a little coding savvy, they actually allow us to do some new and different things that add additional functionality to the program. So they're quite useful. What I'm going to show you doesn't only apply to rigging, but it can apply to animation as well, and anything else that you might be using Maya for. There are a ton of scripts out there. A lot of them are for free. A lot of them can be used to augment your skills and sort of increase all of the tools that you have in your toolbox. So if you ever find yourself wanting to do something that Maya can't quite do in the base program, go ahead and look around for a script. But I'll show you how to install some of the scripts that I'm going to give you in order to make our job rigging a lot easier. And as we go through class, we're going to be using these scripts a lot, so you need to make sure that you get these installed. And if you have issues installing, please let me know because we need to get you caught up. And like I said, we're going to be needing these scripts for the rest of class. So again, please let me know if you have any issues getting these scripts installed. So before we get started, what you're actually going to do first is actually download these scripts. They're files that we're going to plug into Maya. So if you go to Blackboard, you'll notice that down here I have or under course materials, I have a rigging scripts little announcement. So you can go ahead and just download that. Oops, let me grab it this way. There we go. And the first thing that we're going to do once you have access to this zip folder is we're going to navigate to a certain path. And this may vary based off of you being on Windows or on Mac. But since I'm on Windows, I'll be demonstrating on Windows. But a couple of notes is that I believe this folder is hidden by default. The library folder is hidden in Mac, so you might need to either when you're in the Finder, hold the Option key and click on Go, and you should be able to find library. Or allegedly while you're in Finder, hitting Command, Shift, and L will directly take you to this library directory. So keep that in mind going forward. But for us Windows users, you can follow along with me as I go navigate to the correct spot to go. So I'm on Windows 11. What this looks like may be different for you, so I can access my documents right out of quick access. But if you don't have that privilege, you can instead go into your PC, navigate to your main drive, which is usually the C drive, go to the users folder, look for your username. In my case, it's my Shocker ID, but it might be different if you're on a personal computer. Then we can go into documents. And now that we're here in documents, we're just looking for a little folder that is Maya in lowercase. We're going to go to the version that you're using, which should be 22 or 23. We'll be using 23 in this example, of course. And we're looking for a little folder called scripts. Now, I already have my scripts in here, but what you're basically going to be doing is from that zip folder, you want to grab everything and either extract it or put it directly into this folder. I'll skip these files because they're all here. But point being, you want to put these directly into the scripts folder, right? You don't want there to be any extra like MART 357 scripts folder in here. These files need to exactly be in this location. Otherwise, Maya won't recognize them and it will not work. So keep that in mind going forward once you download it and extract these scripts, that they have to be in the root of the scripts folder. Do not put them in any subfolders, otherwise Maya will simply not load them. And the second thing to do after this, if you haven't already, is that you'll want to close Maya and restart it. So it basically reloads this path and recognizes these in this file path. I've already done so, and as you can see up here, I actually already have these extra buttons, but I'll be making them alongside you just in case we get something wrong in order for you to follow along. So again, restart Maya after you paste those into that exact location, and once you do, we can go ahead and get started. So in order to run these scripts, we're going to be using the script editor, right? And we can find the script editor by just going down to the very bottom right. We're looking for this little gray box that has a semicolon nested in some curly brackets. So if you click that, it'll open the script editor. And I believe another way to get to that is to go to Windows, General Editors, looking for script editor down here, and we can also access it that way. And again, if you'll notice here, right, as I work and operate in the program, like I make some cubes, or I want to create a curve, or, you know, make some joints via the rigging tools, You'll notice here in the script editor that Maya is updating these with the commands. And if you're a little coding savvy, or if you're doing repetitive motions, you can actually grab these and run them as their own script. So if I, copy this, went over to the MEL tab, since this is in Maya's language, oops, I'm going to go over here and ran this, again, it would do basically the same thing that I already did. So if you're finding yourself needing to repeat certain operations, or you're doing the same sort of set of scaling and extrusions on a model, and you want to save some clicks, you can use this to sort of automate that process. But I'll delete these for now. I'll delete all of my examples. As you can see, it's selecting and deleting over there. But I'll show you how to use some of the scripts that we just put in that script folder and bring them into Maya. So I saved you some clicks, saved you some typings. So if you'll notice in the zip folder that I gave you, there is a scripts text document. So if we double click that and open it up, we'll get access to a little bit of code. And if you've been paying attention, a lot of these statements are formatted in a similar way to how the Maya language is going as well, because they're in that Maya language. And we're just going to start off the bat looking for our comment orient tools. So we'll just highlight this at the semicolon, drag all the way back up to the double slashes, use Control-C to copy. You can also right-click copy and go over to the MEL box. Again, we want this to be MEL. If you don't have this, you can hit plus to add a new tab, add an MEL, but this is not a Python script, so if we run this as Python, it simply will not work. So instead, we'll copy that text, paste it here in the MEL tab. If you'll notice here, if you remember from our scripting, or our expression editor rather, sort of those double forward slashes in the Maya language means it's a comment. So this won't be basically evaluated as a line of code, so we can leave notes for ourselves to help us remind what this is. And I did so in this instance, that this is the comment joint orient tool. And again, it's just calling the script through comment joint orient, open parentheses, close parentheses, semicolon. Gotta love that coding language. So once I have this in here, I'll highlight this text and I'll go up here to this blue button. It looks like the play button, and we'll hit execute. And if all went according to plan, you should get this comment joint orient menu. And this is that script that we got. It's from Comet Cartoons. They're folks online, and they have another host of very useful scripts that you can take a look at and peruse if you want to see other operations that people have done. Again, this is sort of somebody else's scripting work that helps us use some tools that are pretty robust. And this is a really nice tool, right? We'll demonstrate it here after a little while, but it's gives us a little bit of extra options. It looks similar to the joint orient tool in Maya, but it gives us a little bit of extra functionality. And depending on where you go in your work, you might see studios actually using this particular script because it's very useful. It's quite old and has withstood the test of time, so it must be pretty good. And we'll see why that is. But in order to get this window, we went through a lot of hassle, right? Like we had to go find this script, we had to copy and paste it over, we had to run it so we could get this joint orient, and that's fine and dandy, but we can basically make a custom button for this, right? So we can put it up on our shelf and it'll be there forever in our version of Maya, so we can save ourselves some clicks and just have access to that. So in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have this pasted in here. We'll highlight this all the way up and go up to File, Save Script to Shelf, and we get an option of what to name this. Now, if you can look up here closely, these are pretty short in the names that we can use, so you want to be creative in how you abbreviate these. But I'll just type in JNT ORNT for joint orient, and I will add a V2 at the end. You don't need to add a V2. This is just so I can distinguish which button is which on my shelf, because I already have these buttons up here. Once you hit OK, you'll see something pops up. And depending on if your UI scale is set to 100 or a custom value, this may appear aligned with these or out of line with these. And that's okay. We can fix that as well. So in order to do that, we'll go up to the button that we just made, right-click it, and hit Edit. You'll notice here, under this tab for command, it actually has the code that we have here stored. So we know that our operation works correctly and that it's been put up there. But we're going to ignore this for now and go over to this Shelves tab. And if you'll notice here, this is sort of like all the different shelf setups in Maya. If you want to figure out where things go or reorder things, you can do so by messing with this side of the shelves menu, but we're not going to do that. What we're looking for instead is to grab an icon. So if you don't have access to your own icon, you can simply switch it to something else and Maya will realign it for you. But in our instance, we'll actually grab a custom icon so we can have this little green joint orient box. It makes it a little more visually distinct, and since it came with a script, why wouldn't we use it, you know? So instead of hitting the M button over here to access the icons that Maya has, we're going to hit the little folder button instead. And pay attention to the path here, right? Where Maya may put you is different, but we're going to again navigate to the scripts folder that we put all of our items that we extracted from the zip folder into, right? So we go up a level. Notice it does say scripts in here, but nothing's in here. This is not the same path that we were looking at before. So we'll actually go up a couple levels and we'll go to this scripts folder. So this is where they ended up going, right? And if you'll notice here, this is like that path or very close to that path that I was talking about earlier. So again, it's very close to scripts. Where it puts you by default when you hit that folder icon may not be correct. So don't get confused and just back up a little bit and we'll go back here into scripts. And you can see here for our joint orient tool, the joint orient.bmp or bitmap, once we select this, it's a little icon. So we can just hit open. It changes up here, and to make sure we keep that change saved, we'll just save all shelves. And if you double check, we can click joint orient and bam. We made our own button using that code, saved it to the shelf, and bada boom. Joint orient is now here for us to access. As long as you don't mess with that folder in Maya, these buttons should stay up here in perpetuity. And something to note, of course, is that if this was on a different shelf when I saved it to shelf, it might show up somewhere else. So before you save it over, do make sure you are on your rigging tab. All right, so that's our first script down. Let's go ahead and keep booking for the next one. So we'll add a comment rename. And let's see here. I'll even go in and double check. So yes, the rename tool is very, very easy. It's simply COMET capital RENAME, so comet rename. You can type this out. I didn't put it in the scripts folder so you could practice typing this out in the proper coding grammar, but I'll cheat a little bit here. No, I won't. I'll type it with you. So again, same process. We'll go down to the script editor. We'll make sure we're in an MEL tab, and I'll type comet rename. So exactly the same as what I had before. And if you'd like to add a comment, or a comment rather, up top, you can do so. So let's go ahead and highlight this, and we'll save it to the shelf. But I'll show you a slightly different way to do this, just to give you a couple different methods to go about it. So once you have your code highlighted that you want to run and execute, I guess we'll test it first. So it's all there, it's all working. But you can also bring this to the shelf by simply clicking and holding middle mouse and dragging up to the shelf, right? And bam, we already have another M there. This time it's aligned with everything else, but it doesn't have a label on it. So we can fix that by going up to the same options that we were looking at before for joint orient. So I'll right click on this button, go down to edit. See that my code has been saved here successfully, so everything's all hunky-dory. Tab over to shelves instead. And what we're looking for is icon label. So I'll just type in rename here, because that's probably about as much as I can get in terms of text. Like JT rename wasn't even enough, if you'll notice here. But once I have that keyed in my icon label, I need to hit enter on the keyboard just to confirm that change. And if you'll notice up here, the icon now has the label rename. And since this also came with its own little icon, I'll just navigate back to the same spot that I was before. Grab the rename bitmap. You can see here it's red and says name on it instead. Hit open. It's already been changed. Bam. And again, just click it to double check and make sure everything's working as it should. And it looks like everything is a-okay. So let's keep trucking. We'll keep adding these different code snippets to the shelf, and I'll show you what they do once we get everything installed. Next up is local rotation axis. So I'll copy that, come back to my script editor. I can get rid of this now since it's been saved to the shelf. paste it. I'll save it to shelf. And a creative name for this might be ROTAX, because local rotation axes is far too much of a mouthful for this to actually save to this shelf. So I went with Rotax. Hit OK. Same deal. I actually want to keep this Maya icon, so I'll just edit it again, go over to the shelves, and I'll choose a different icon. 3D Paint, that's fine. I actually want the command button, but in order to get this aligned, I'll just have to switch it over and then change it back. So I have it changed over, it's now aligned. I'll just type command again to get the command button, select it, boom. Save as to the shelf. So I'll keep going along. This time is for select hierarchy. Same deal, go to the script editor, paste in our script, highlight everything. Since this is pretty easy, I know it's going to work. I'm going to stop testing these since they should work on your machine as well. Middle mouse drag up to the shelf. Right click and edit so we can give them a label. Tab over to shelf. Change the icon label to cell high for select hierarchy. Hit enter. And that way that change has been saved up here. Save to the shelf. And let's rinse and repeat for 0 out. Same goes. Copy. Oops. I actually pasted that on top of that, so I just want to highlight everything instead. Control V to paste. Grab this, drag it up to the shelf, right click edit, go over to the icon label, and make this 0 out. And that's short enough. Yep, looks like that'll work. Save to shelf. All right, home stretch here. Select the rotation axis. Again, I'm going to start here this time at the curly bracket, not the semicolon, because that's the end of the phrase here in code. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to start at the end of the curly bracket, go all the way up to the double slashes where my comment is. Control C, go back to my MEL window, Control V, highlight it all, drag it up to the shelf, edit it with right click, go down to the Shelves tab, relabel it to, this is select rotation axis. So I did cell rotax up here. It kind of got cut off, so you could do S rotax or just cell ax. Get creative with it, but I'll do S rotax for our purposes. Hit enter to save that label, save it to the shelf. All right, so we're almost there. We just have one more line of code that you should use, but as I've noted here in the comment, you use Python for this script instead, which will allow us to make some custom control curves. So if everything's been pasted into your scripts folder, this should work a-okay. So I'm going to copy this. Actually, I'll grab from the end of the parentheses actually all the way up to this little pound sign. Pound sign is what you use to comment out in Python. It's just slightly different from Maya. So if I try to paste this over in the MEL tab, right, Maya's going to throw a fit. It doesn't know what this is or what's going on. It's because this isn't an MEL script, right? I'll highlight this and delete this. This is a Python script. So what I'll instead do is I'll go over to a Python tab. And again, if you don't have access to that, go to the plus sign and then choose another Python tab. Then with my stuff highlighted, I'll paste it in, run it just to double check. I get into a little controls menu. That's grand. I'll paste this again, highlight it, drag it up to the shelf. You notice here the symbol is actually a little bit different. I think that's just the symbol for Python. Same deal, right click edit, go over to shelves, change the icon label. I'll just call this CTRL, CRV, or CURV for control curve. Hit enter to make sure that gets saved. Save all the shelves. All right, so you've done it. You've installed a ton of scripts up to your shelf. You should have probably, 7 of them? And I'll do a quick rundown of what they are and how we can use them in rigging. But this is the basis of how you get those scripts installed. And again, like I mentioned, this change that you make to Maya is permanent. Of course, if you want to remove these, you can right-click and delete. But if I close my Maya and open it back up, these buttons will still be saved to my rigging shelf. So keep that in mind. You don't have to do this every single time you create a new project or a new document. You should be good to go after you install it the first time. So let's do a little bit of demonstration. First is that I will grab my joint tool, hold X to snap it to the grid, and just click along. Looks like my joint tool is actually kind of small. So, well, this is a great example to show off one of our scripts, right? So these are all a little small in terms of how the bone displays. So I'm going to blow this up, right? If I want to key it in with all this highlighted and, change them to, let's say, 0.5, it only works on the first one. So what we can do to grab all of them, instead of trying to drag, select, and hope things turn white, because again, it's turning green, not if I start to select multiple items, we can save a few clicks. So I'll just grab the parent in this hierarchy chain, right? I'll go over to my select hierarchy or cell high button. All it does is select everything inside a hierarchy. So again, you can save yourself some clicks that way to just grab everything in a hierarchy. If I say have another joint chain that's, outside of this, and I do the same deal, it won't grab everything in Maya, it only do in the hierarchy. Same stuff if I grab a bone further down in the chain and use select hierarchy, it'll grab everything beneath that. So I'll delete that, and I'll instead use my select hierarchy tool to change the display size of my bone radius. Make it even a little bit bigger so I can see what's going on. Grand. So that's one use of select hierarchy. Let's take a look at the rotax button next. So again, if I grab something and hit the rotax button, you'll notice I'm getting my rotation axis displayed here. This is a lot more useful and a lot quicker than, going up to display, transform display, local rotation axes, or even if through my rigging shelf menu, going down to skeleton, orient joint, and then using that toggle local axes visibility button that I had shown off in our previous lectures. So instead, to show all of them, I can just again grab everything with select hierarchy, punch that rotax button, and now bam. These rotation axes are visible for us to look at. Once we begin laying out and working on a rig later on, this will be super useful to keep these up and help us make sure our joint orientation is all copacetic and great. So let's actually talk about joint orientation for a moment, right? So previously, to grab these local rotation axes and edit them, we had to select the bone, go up to component selection, then grab our rotate tool and highlight them. See, it doesn't even work sometimes, right? It's a little finicky. Let's see here. Make sure we have our little question mark selected. Now I can grab it. So I can manually grab these rotation axes this way. And even when I click out, I still have to revert back to object selection mode to get things back to normal. But we have a little button for this now. So I'll grab this down here instead. Choose my S rotax or select rotation axis. Change it back to my rotation tool after I hit it. And you see I can grab this directly without switching into component mode. And I'll mess these up a little bit further down the way, just so we can show off a little bit of our other tools here. So that's fine and dandy, that's hunky-dory. Let's sort of keep in mind here what I've grabbed with select rotax and what I've rotated. So let's just keep those joints in mind as we go forward here. But next we'll be looking at the zero out tool, then we'll take a final look at joint orient and the rename tool. So let's say this chain is maybe going to be a tail for a critter that I'm making. The layout I'm not super pleased with, so I'm going to start grabbing these bones to rotate them back into place. Go through the outliner to select these. Get it straightened out and have this be the layout that I want my resting position on my rig to be. Now, these are all a mess. This is terrible. And something that I've been sort of hammering home is having these clean rotations, right? But the more I look down this chain, all of these have a value in the rotation, looking at it either in the channel box or the attribute editor. So again, as I go down the chain, you can see that not only is rotation changed, but on those the joints that I used the select rotate axis on, there's also some values stored in the rotate axis, as well as the joint orient as we've talked about before. We don't want that, right? So we want these to be clean. We want them to all be zeroed out. So when our animators punch in 0, that this returns to this position, right? So we don't tell our animators to rotate, joint 2 to 47.69. We just want them to be able to punch in 0 and have them get back to this resting position. So let's go ahead and grab everything. I'll select the parent, use our select hierarchy button again. I'll go up to modify, freeze transformations, down to the box just to make sure it freezes, translate, rotate, and scale. Punch in that freeze transform. Now you'll look, our rotation values are now all zeroed out. So again, if I'm like, posing this tail and I'm an animator, or even if I'm a rigger and testing it out, right, and I'm like, okay, this has been fine and dandy. I need this to return back to its zeroed out position. I can select the hierarchy again, change all of my rotations, key in 0, and bam, this is its new rest position. So that's good. That's great. Check the attribute editor. Uh-oh. Looks like rotate axis is still set to 253. That's not what we want. So let's just freeze transformations again, right? Run it again. It worked. The rotate axis is not changing. This is the issue with cleaning up rotate axis, right? Is that it's not a transform that Maya would typically let us freeze. So instead, we'll use our zero out button. And once we click that, bam, rotate axis is now clean. So not only is our rotate holding 0 as values, the rotate axis is also holding those 0 values. So that is an instance in where the zero out button might come in handy. Once we finally start getting to laying out our final joints, I'll be looking and grading this rotate axis window. If this is clean, that's what you want. So we now have a script to help us do that. All right. So I'll mess this up even further, right? Instead of rotating my bones like I should, I'll drag this around, change my orientation, make it incorrect, improper. Well, let's fix this with a joint orient tool. So again, we could fix this by going up to the skeleton orient joint tool like we've looked at before, but I don't want to do that. Let's use the comet joint orient tool. So I'll select the hierarchy again and punch the joint orient button. And if you'll notice, a lot of our options here are pretty similar, right? Like aim axis is primary axis, up axis is the secondary axis, and then the world up direction is the same as world orientation. But this has a little bit more versatility to it, notably being like the reverse keys, as well as the ability to manually tweak our rotation axes through buttons also in the program. So I'll just change this so my aim axis is X, so X is pointing down the bone at its next joint. Change the up axis to Y, and change this over to 1. You could also punch the Y button and it'll zero out the other things for you. So if you wanted this to be pointed down instead, you could also key in -1, but we want our up axis to be going positively in Maya space. Let's punch orient joints, and bam, everything is cleaned up. And if you'll notice here too, the end is also oriented how it needs to be. With our orient joint tool in just the base Maya, we had to go up to that option, if you remember, where we had to tick on orient joint to world, tick it on and off, so just the end joint in the chain would orient itself. So again, this is how the comet tool can save us some time. All right, lastly, we'll just take a quick look at the rename tool because it pretty much does what it says on the tin. Let's say that this is my tail, right? And I want the word joint to be replaced with tail. So I will, again, either highlight this or select this in the outliner and use Shift to grab everything, or I can select it, use the Select Hierarchy button, and go over to the Rename tool. So Maya has some tools for this in the Modify menu, right? We can prefix hierarchy names or search and replace names, but those are in separate things, and they are a couple clicks away, so Comet Rename puts this all in one. So for the first operation, we'll just show off the search and replace. Again, let's say this is the tail, right? So we just want it to search for joint and replace it with the word tail. Bam, search and replace, easy money. But maybe let's say this is actually like part of the spine that goes into the tail. And I want the tail to start down here at where we have it currently labeled to tail 4. So what I can do instead is highlight this, select it. I could also grab this joint in the chain and use Select Hierarchy to highlight them all. You use rename and number instead. So we want this to be tail 1. And let's see what happens actually. Yep, easy. So once we run that rename and number, it'll be set to tail 1, 2, and 3. And we can say maybe the spine is up here, right? So we can instead make this selection spine and rename it spine 1, 2, and 3. Or if this was all on the left side, we could add the prefix of L underscore. So now this is all set to left. So once we start labeling and renaming our joints, this can save us a lot of time as opposed to going in one by one, and changing this to R tail 2 and make this R tail 1. We can do this with a couple of clicks. So that is a brief overview of what scripts can do in Maya and how they can help improve our functionality. I'll delete these. Oh, actually, before we go, I will show off the control curves as well. This basically just allows us to, as it says, make some custom control curves. You could draw this out in Maya yourself with like the curve drawing tools, but this basically just saves us some time. So you can just scroll down, choose a shape that you like to see, let's say a sphere dumbbell, hit the word origin, and bam, Maya makes a single curve that takes on that shape for us. So maybe we want to do 4 arrows. Bam. And of course, we can change the color by just simply, with that highlighted, choosing another color. And feel free to play around with the different options. You really only need to use the origin button to spawn it in at the origin, but you can also use parent or child to maybe make it the parent or a child of an already selected object in the world. And just what world does is that it puts it in the same space at the world. So if I grab L tail, hit the cross button, choose world, it is now on top of that L tail. So that is what the other control curves do. Again, this is what the different scripts will allow us to do in Maya and allow us to save some time, save some clicks here and there, and all that good stuff. Again, if you're unable to get these scripts to work and you come up with errors, please let me know, because in order to be caught up with class and to use these going forward, we need to make sure that all of your scripts are on your shelf and working. But that's all I have, so I hope this was helpful. And cut.